Welcome back to this episode of the Meaningful People podcast. I want to say quickly that this episode is sponsored. Leilai Nishmas, Rachalea Bas Moshe, Yitzchak Meir Ben Avraham, Aaron Tzvi Ben Moshe Usher, Chaim Moshe Ben Binyamin Tzvi, Shimon Fischel Ben Aaron Tzvi, and Shlomi Shmaryahu Ben Aaron Tzvi. A big thank you to our friend, our sponsor from Chicago, Mechinu Dell, for sponsoring this episode. This week we had the honor. We actually didn't sit down with him this week. We sat down with him quite a while ago.
Yeah, it's been a minute.
Yeah, happens to be the week we sat down with Rabbi Chaim Dovid Zweibel was around the same time that those Jews got kicked off that flight, that Lufthansa flight.
Yeah.
And interestingly enough, this week those Jews that were kicked off received a check in the mail for upwards of $17,000.
Wow.
In
how are you doing?
Compensation. That's the word I'm looking for in compensation. I was going to say like consomme, like soup.
There you go.
They received a lot of soup in the mail.
Thank you, Nissen.
Shkoyach. But we sat down with Rabbi Chaim Dovid Zweibel, who is the head honcho, the leader at the Aguda, the executive director, which is so appropriate because this weekend when we put this out is actually the Aguda convention.
That's right. If you're listening right out of the gate, Aguda convention right now live as we speak.
Yeah, that's when they convene.
Exactly.
That's what a convention is.
Which is unconventional for Aguda.
Because
historically they've always done the convention on the Thanksgiving weekend.
Uh-huh.
This is a trailblazing model to do it.
Speaking of trailblazers,
right?
Touro University. Now we'll get back to you, Touro. Relax over there. How are you? Anyways, I think you'll enjoy this episode if you're an Askin or if you're an aspiring Askin or if you don't like Askanim. I think you'll like it regardless.
Very deep.
Very deep. But we first like to say a big thank you to our friends at Tovido, because Tovido is the place where you want your kids watching content. They create content all year long, whether it's for Purim, Hanukkah, or regular during the week. Don't give them that Flixnet stuff. Give them the Tovido stuff. Flixnet, that's what it's called? I think so.
Something like that.
I think Flixnet.
Ein Muktam Uma Ocher.
Tenflix, something like that.
Well, what's cool about Tovido, in addition to just being like a kosher spot to consume content, is that they're constantly refreshing the content that's there.
Are they?
Yeah. So you're not just like buying a set of DVDs that you know your kids will like. You're giving them access to ongoing streaming of kosher content.
Absolutely.
And once they've consumed stuff that they like, guess what? There's going to be more stuff that they like.
And guess what? You could now save 15% off at Tovido by using the promo code that we have for you, which is MM15. That's MM15. Use that promo code if you like us. If you don't like us,
I like how everyone uses a different promo code, by the way.
I know, it's amazing how original people can
change it up.
You know, sort of like JKaraoke.
Exactly.
Hanukkah's coming up. JKaraoke is your number one stop shop to get that karaoke, the Jewish karaoke, because you don't want to be singing any songs that are goyish. You want to be singing. It's too early for me to have this much energy, you're saying, with no coffee?
I think it's fantastic.
Yeah. Anyways, JKaraoke is the number one place you got to go, jkaraoke.com. The link is in the description. Make sure you get this for your children for Hanukkah or just regular for the year. If you think they're aspiring music star, we mentioned.
But it's a really good like Hanukkah activity
for sure.
I know families at this time of year are brainstorming, what can we do for Hanukkah? What do we do at the get-together? Do we have to hire outside third parties? You don't necessarily need to do that. You may want to do that, but you may want to just insource it.
Yeah, like child labor. Like, let's get your kid on the mic.
No, but what a fun night. What a fun Hanukkah night.
Yeah,
right?
Totally. And also, if you invest in your kid now young, he might be able to be a singer and then pay for your like retirement plan.
Interesting.
Because singers are doing so well nowadays, like we discussed last week's episode.
Yeah.
Yeah. So JKaraoke could pay for your retirement. How about that? You can also use promo code JKMinute. That's 15% off for JKMinute. Head to their website, JKaraoke. That's JKaraoke.com. JKaraoke.com. JK Minute.
Okay.
See, these promo codes are tripping me up. JK Minute, you have 15% off for this week. Last week was 10% off. This week's 15% off. Take advantage of that.
It's in the show notes, though, right? You don't have to like write it down.
It's in the show notes. You don't take notes. Don't worry. It's in the show notes.
Exactly.
Anyways, we hope you enjoy this week's episode.
You are listening to the Meaningful People podcast.
The podcast featuring our nation's most impactful, influential,
and meaningful people. What an honor. What a schus it is to be sitting with Rabbi Chaim Dovid Zweibel in Cedarhurst. I appreciate you making the trip out here and giving us some of your time. We know it's really, really valuable, your time.
Thank you very much. First of all, let me wish you greater schusim in your life. But it's a pleasure to be here and looking very much forward to our conversation.
Awesome.
Thank you so much.
Diving right in. I always try to find unique ways to start these episodes. The goal is to never start it the way that people think it's going to start. But at your position with the Aguda, which we'll get into, I'm sure, over this conversation, before you got to that point, you had a different career. You had a different life. What were you doing, and how did that lead to what you're doing now?
Well, if you want a short bio, I grew up on the Upper West Side of Manhattan. After attending Brooklyn College, while I was in Tarvadas, including 2 years of Kollel, I went to law school. I was part of the first graduating class at Cardozo Law School. I was editor-in-chief of Volume 1 of the Law Review, my big yichus over there in the school. And then took a position with a Manhattan-based law firm called Paul Weiss, Rifkin, Wharton & Garrison, which is one of the larger firms in the United States.
It's a large name.
It's
a lot of names.
A lot of names, right? Right, that's right. Well, Weiss could have been Weisskopf Fiddle or something. So it wasn't that bad. But and I spent 4.5 years at Paul Weiss doing primarily litigation. And from time to time feeling that I was doing something meaningful, but more often thinking, I'm protecting one company against another's hostile takeover bid or against an antitrust challenge or things of that nature. And I thought to myself, this is rewarding in the traditional way. It's intellectually challenging and pays nicely, and I'm able to have parnasa. But I can't really say that I was fulfilled in the work that I was doing at Paul Weiss. And it's not just because of the long hours. But then a very great turning point in my life took place after I'd been there for about 4 years and was walking home from shul on Yom Kippur, or maybe it was Rosh Hashanah, I think, Rosh Hashanah, with my 2 little boys at that time, 7 years old and 6 years old, or 7 years old and 5 years old. And I turned to them, and I turned to the older one, and I said, Sender, what did you have in mind during davening? So he said 2 things. Mashiach should come, and your office should burn.
Mm. That's not usual. That's
not necessarily in that order of importance, by the way. And basically what he was telling me, Tati, you're never home.
Wow.
You're never home. Your office should burn. And that really pierced me. Right? Mm-hmm. Fortunately, at that particular moment, I had been working on a case at Paul Weiss, a pro bono case, involving where the plaintiffs were represented by the Puerto Rican Legal Defense Fund, and the defendants were the United Jewish Council of the Lower East Side. And it related to a challenge against how the United Jewish Council of the Lower East Side had been advertising available apartments in a housing complex that they were responsible for. And the allegations were that this was something that was being done in a manner that would attract Jewish applicants and discourage Latino and African American applicants. And the United Jewish Council of Lower East Side reached out to Paul Weiss for pro bono representation, and I was the lawyer handling the case. And happily, we won the case. And I was thinking to myself, gosh, that was really meaningful. Mm. I was using my legal skills within Paul Weiss. I was using my legal skills not to help some big corporation avoid antitrust liability or anything of that nature, but actually to help Jews, to help my people, to help my brothers and sisters. Just about then, I got a visit from Rabbi Shmuel Blum. He should be Gesundheitsstark. He was, at that point, the number 2 person in the Aguda. He came to my office at Paul Weiss to talk to me about, he wanted to raise some money. At that time, I had money because I was a big fancy lawyer, right? And then he said, by the way, what are your long-term plans? So I said, it's an interesting thing. I just had this interesting conversation with my son on Rosh Hashanah, and I think I'm going to start exploring other options. The next thing I knew, I was invited to a meeting in Rabbi Scherer's house, Rabbi Moshe Scherer, Zechron Livracha, and he sounded me out about the possibility of joining the Aguda. The person who was the director of government and public affairs, Menachem Lubinsky, my dear friend Menachem, who is still very active today, but he was going to be leading the Aguda and going into private practice, the private sector, and that position was open. So public affairs, they said, that's not for you, but government affairs, that's something you might be good at.
How old are you at this time?
I graduated, I must have been 31.
Okay.
I was 31 years old.
It's pretty young.
31 years old. Well, it was 1984 when I started. And I'll never forget, we had an opportunity to tell the world that I was making this career move from Paul Weiss to Aguda. So my colleagues at Paul Weiss, I wrote a departure memo. They call it a departure memo, saying that I'm leaving and I'm taking this job, and why I was so excited about it. So I got so many responses from all my colleagues at Paul Weiss. Wow, what a perfect position for you! It's great. You'll go in there and you'll use your legal skills for your community, like you did in the Lower East Side. Perfect. Wow, wonderful. And my reaction back on the home front in Borough Park, Flatbush, and so on was, "Was bist du Meshiga?" So, and probably both were right. There's an element of
all in caps.
All in caps, exactly. And that's when I started working for the Aguda, and Baruch Hashem, I've been at it since 1984. Wow. And here we are, right? 2012, so 38 years.
Yeah, 2022.
Did I say 12? So there you go. You get to my age, you'll start wishing it was 12 again.
Just 10 years.
That's it.
It's for someone, not for someone, and someone's listening, I hope, but maybe a couple people are listening. And they hear about the Aguda, and they know the Aguda exists, and they see the letters with the nice letterhead. What is the Aguda? What is the purpose of the Aguda?
Well, the Aguda, interestingly, here in the United States, it was founded 100 years ago exactly, 1922, which is why I ought to remember that now it's 2022. Right? But the concept of an Agudas Yisrael was started 10 years before that, 110 years ago in Europe, when great Gedolei Yisrael from different parts of Europe, Western Europe and Eastern Europe, came to they were all dealing with challenges that they felt they could better deal with if there was an achdus, a unity among the different types of Jewish communities.
Right.
So they decided, let's create a movement, an organization, which would attract Jews from Poland and from Hungary and from Lithuania and from Germany and from wherever else. And regardless of what their havara was, how they pronounced words, and regardless of what their minhagim might be, and whether they were Hasidish or Litvish or whatever the different possibilities, right? Bring everybody together under one umbrella and thereby enhance our kayach, our ability, our power, our authority to accomplish on behalf of the community, to fight the dangerous winds that were blowing. I mean, it was a reaction. Interesting. We had, a Kids Off the Derech challenge that we have today.
In 1922?
In 1912, in the early 1900s, it was an enormous challenge.
Really?
At that time.
Sure.
An enormous challenge.
Of course, were people that saw the type of persecution and the difficulties that are
poverty was terrible. At that
epigenetics,
huh?
Yeah. Sure, and just the philosophy of Shvertz
Zayin, which
and people needed reason to stick around.
These were like dangerous winds, plus the winds of Haskalah and the winds. Right, Haskalah again was something, the Enlightenment, which was very attractive to a lot of Jews who felt oppressed, and Bundism and communism and all kinds of different.
So when people say like, oh, this generation and the off the derech issue, like this always existed.
It always existed, and it, there's an ebb and flow, perhaps a little bit, and obviously there are different factors that can lead to it in different communities and different time periods and so on. But at that time, that's one of the reasons that the Gedolei Yisrael felt it was important to band together and create a stronger force. And then for the reasons that occupy much of my time, which are political in nature. We are more of a political force. We have a greater standing in our relationship with the government, which passes laws and enforces laws that affect our lives, right? A greater opportunity to do so if we are a larger community and we represent not only Litvaks or Hasidim or Sfardim or Ashkenazim or so on, and we try to bring together all different groups under one umbrella, and that has been and under one umbrella, recognizing that you're creating a guf tziburi, a communal body, right? And every body has a head, right? And the head of this guf tziburi that we're calling Agudas Yisrael would be the Gedolei Yisrael. This was the philosophy, the thought that who are better equipped than our Gedolei Yisrael, who are not only scholars of Jewish law and values and thought and so on and so forth, but also the people to whom people who with problems will come and pour out their hearts and speak to them about the various challenges that they face, and this is what their lives are all about. They should be the ones who stand at the head of the organization, this movement, Gedolei Yisrael, and thus was created a body called the Moetzes Gedolei Torah. Which is still in force today, Baruch Hashem, and at Aguda at least, when questions of policy of Yisrael Bein Ha'amim, how are we to react when Lufthansa employees act in such a blatantly anti-Jewish, anti-Semitic way? What is our relationship with the German government, with the German people when we confront what Lufthansa did? These are questions which have to be looked at through a prism of greatness in Torah, of Torah scholarship. This is how the organization was formed, bringing together the different groups under the leadership of the Gedolei Yisrael. I remember the very first convention that I participated in 1983. Before I started working for the Aguda, but after the offer had been extended to me to work at the Aguda. I started in January 84, but in November of 83, I came to a convention, and I looked up at the dais, and sitting at the dais were Gedolei Rosh Yeshiva from Litvish Yeshivas. I remember one of the speakers at that convention was Rav Pam, my Rebbe. I loved him so much. Zecher Tzadik Livracha. And the next speaker was Rav Shimon Schwab from the Washington Heights community. And I forget who the third speaker was. And sitting at the dais, you had Sephardic Gedolei Yisrael and Ashkenazim and Hasidisha, and you had up hats and you had down hats. And sitting in the audience, I was surrounded by people, some of them wearing hats and some of them not wearing hats, and kippot sugot even, and so on. And it was all of a sudden like it hit me. I'd understood it intellectually, that there's something called Klal Yisrael, right? And Klal Yisrael means a little bit broader than my Daled Amos in my local shtibel. Right? There's a Klal Yisrael. And here these great Talmidei Chacham and Gedolei Yisrael were speaking about issues that affected Klal Yisrael, and not just local issues. I felt myself as part of Klal Yisrael, and I felt at that point that if I had developed over my years of training in law school and the 4.5 years of practice that I had at Paul Weiss at that time, I had developed certain skills. Shouldn't I be giving them back to the community? If I'm part of Klal Yisrael, don't I owe that to Klal Yisrael? These are my brothers and sisters. So that was the impetus, the idealistic young me. Yeah,
but I mean that probably entailed you giving up a nice, handsome parnasa and going into klal work, which is not always a nice, handsome parnasa.
Always not.
Always not. I wasn't going to be the one to say
I had a fascinating conversation with Rabbi Shmuel Bloom about that when he came to first sound me out about the possibility of I should meet with Rabbi Sher. What am I planning to do? So he says to me, so I say to him, it all sounds very wonderful, but I have Kanahar, a family of children, right? And I have to provide them with Parnasa. So Rabbi Bloom tells me, Rabbi Bloom said, would you be interested perhaps in working for the Aguda? So I said to him, it sounds very nice, but what would be the Parnasa? I have to give my family Parnasa. I have a growing family, Kanahar. So he tells me, well, for those of us who say benching, the long form of benching, we say this last part of benching includes the phrase, Harachaman hu yafarnesenu b'chavayid. Right? Pashut Pshat, we ask Hashem, the Rachman, the one who has mercy, hu yafarnesenu, may he give us parnasa b'chavayid, with honor. So Rabbi Bloom says that's not the correct Pshat. Pshat is, Rachman hu yafarnesenu b'chavayid. There are some people who get their parnasa with money. There are other people who get their parnasa with kavod, with honor. So come to the Aguda, you'll get a lot of parnasa. It won't be the money kind, but it'll be kavod anashir.
And you didn't roll
your eyes. He misled me then too.
And you didn't roll your eyes at that.
But it was, Baruch Hashem, I'm married to a very wonderful woman who has her eyes on the prize. And we have been blessed. And I think that decision of leaving the private practice of law, the lucrative private practice of law at a top-flight law firm, and coming to work for Klal Yisrael by working for the Aguda, Hashem has said thank you to me so many times over in my life, I can't tell you. I've been blessed with a remarkable family who bring me parnasa b'chaved, as we say, who bring me nachas ad ein shir. And what can I say? I'm very grateful to Rabbi Sher Zechreinu L'Bracha and to Rabbi Bloom for giving me the opportunity. And the truth is that most nights I come home. First of all, the office hasn't burned.
Yeah, I was curious about that.
Yeah, there was a fire in the archives of the Aguda about a year after I started, but. So my tefillah may have been there.
Where was your son that night?
That's right. That's right.
HaKadosh Baruch Hu yishalem secharcha. For someone that is so Isaac in the Tzarchei Tzibur, someone so involved in taking care of the needs of Klal Yisrael, I'm sure you will see the rewards.
Amen. Thank you. So that's the story of how I started working for the Aguda. And as I say, I come home most nights feeling that. I lived a day that was worth living. I did something which was meaningful. Not always. There are the frustrations. Right. There are lots of frustrations in klal work. There are lots of frustrations in any line of work. Let's face it, right? And sometimes, we are our own greatest enemies and create all kinds of problems for ourselves. And it's something that makes you want to pull your hair out. But nonetheless, at the same time, it's a beautiful community, right? With all its warts and all its problems and all its challenges, it's a beautiful community, and it's a privilege to be able to represent them.
Sure.
We'll be right back to this episode of the Meaningful People podcast, but first I want to give you a little bit of a message from our friends at Touro University. Of course, another trailblazer, and his name is Eli Pupko. Who's Eli Pupko?
He's good people.
He's good people.
He's good people. He's over at Merrill Lynch.
Merrill?
Yeah, he's at Merrill Lynch.
California.
Give our best to Merrill, please. How are you, dude?
Also Lynch.
And he's doing a lot of wealth strategy. Yeah, he's a wealth strategist at Merrill Lynch, and he's helping people just figure out their finances.
Yeah.
And when you hear wealth strategist, this doesn't necessarily mean that you're a wealthy person. It's an advisor to help you navigate your finances.
Yeah.
And maybe you want to diversify, maybe you want to make some investments, maybe you want to purchase some risk.
He also might be a wealthy person.
He may.
Pretty cool. Do you know why?
I don't know him personally.
Do you know why it'd be cool?
Why would it be cool?
Because he got that start at Touro.
Very deep.
And what Touro does is, besides for creating, trailblazers and people who impact the community, they create wealthy people.
Interesting.
That is true. So go ahead and get your degree at Touro University. Head to 50.touro.edu. It's 50 years. Touro University going strong. Head to 50.touro.edu and enjoy the rest of this episode.
We'd love to unpack some of your early experiences with personalities like Rav Moshe Sher and being able to interact and to really see the vision that they had and how they executed it. I think this generation is maybe missing some of that insight, that visibility. What was that like?
Rav Moshe Scherer was nifter in 1998, which means where are we up to now? 22, right? As your arithmetic, but that's 24 years. Is that? Yeah, this is. I stumped you now, huh? I think it's 24 years, right?
It really is. It really is.
Shout out to Yeshiv Rockaway.
So it's 24 years since Rabbi Scherer was nifter. Rabbi Scherer was a legend in his time. I met with United States senators and other bigwigs in the business world and the world of media and the world of government and so on.
You can name drop if you want.
Okay.
Jeff Bezos, Bill Gates. It's okay.
And I never met anybody as smart as Rabbi Scherer. I mean, I worked at a law firm of smart people. This was you got to be smart to get into there. Never met anybody as smart as Rabbi Scherer. Rabbi Scherer, people certainly didn't know this at the time. Rabbi Scherer never went to college.
Wow.
He never went to college. And yet he was the most sophisticated, politically savvy, strategically brilliant person that I know. Plus he drank the Kool-Aid, which for a younger generation may be a phrase that they're not familiar with. But drinking the Kool-Aid means there was a cult, and you became a part of this cult by drinking a special drink that was prepared for you and was told that it was Kool-Aid, when in fact it was mixed with some hallucinogenic drug.
He drank that.
So Rabbi Scherer drank the Kool-Aid, and he got me to drink the Kool-Aid too. And the drinking the Kool-Aid was, he really believed in the ideals of Agudas Yisrael. I'll never forget. There was a meeting. There was an issue, a sensitive issue related to some sort had a legal angle to it. And so Rabbi Scherer asked me to convene a group of lawyers who would be knowledgeable in this area and to discuss the issue with them and see what they would recommend, how we ought to deal with it. So we brought together a room full of about half a dozen or so top flight lawyers, and we went through the different possibilities and different options. And basically they said there are two ways to go over here. Either you take option A, which is whatever it is, and option B. And our recommendation is option A, because option B is very risky, and there's a good chance that it'll be a total failure, and then we'll be in trouble. Option A is a much safer approach. Great. Rabbi Scherer invites me into the meeting of at that time it was the Nesias of Agudas Yisrael, which was a rabbinic body just below the level of the Moetzes Gedolei Torah. Many of the Rabbanim there eventually became members of the Moetzes Gedolei Torah. And he asked me to come in and help him make the presentation on the issue. And so I told him, we went through the issue. I said we brought in a bunch of lawyers who are expert in this area, and they considered the different choices, and they said, here are the two choices, option A, option B, and they recommended option A for the following reasons, and so on. And then I left the room. Rabbi Scherer, then the members of the Nesias of Agudas Yisrael, these Rabbanim, then deliberated among themselves. After asking a few questions, they deliberated among themselves. They called us back and they said, option B. We heard your recommendation and we appreciate the expertise of the attorneys who had considered it. But from our perspective, option B is the only way to go, and that's what the Agudah should do. I was crushed. I was devastated. This was the first year I had started working for the Agudah.
Wow.
It just made no sense to me, And here's Rabbi Scherer walking out of the meeting with a spring in his step, and he's saying, we're going to call up this guy, and I'm going to call up this congressman, and he's like laying out a whole game plan of how to implement this decision that had been made by the Rabbanim. I said, Rabbi Scherer, I don't understand. I mean, you heard the recommendation of the lawyers. They know what's going on. Right, and of course I understand if you have to go through the formal process of getting approval from the Rabbanim, but I mean, come on.
Right. You feel like they're telling you that your right hand is your left hand.
Yeah. Well, even Shul, very good. That's the. And Rabbi Scherer says, Chaim Dovid, don't you understand? I said to him, so why are you so excited about this? I understand we've got to carry out option B now. It's going to be a tzara, but we got to do it. I understand. But why are you so happy and excited about it? So he says, Chaim Dovid, don't you understand? It's a day like today that I joined, that made me join the Aguda. I could have had a job. I could have taken a position with any Jewish organization if I wanted to go into Jewish organizational life. I could have gone anywhere I wanted. But over there, I knew who was making the decisions. The wealthy balabatim make the decisions. Kol hakavod, you have to have wealthy balabatim, and they have to be able to support the organization. You're not going to have an organization without wealthy balabatim. But that they should be the ones making decisions for Klal Yisrael, the ones who have to make decisions are the Rabbanim. So even if the balabatim say one thing, but the balabatim should not be the decision makers. The Rabbanim should. The Gedolei Yisrael should. And sometimes you may not agree, and I may not agree with their decision. But that's the only way to have legitimacy. That's the only way to know that you're being faithful to representing really Jewish values. So this was the lesson that he imparted to me that day.
I think this might be a good opportunity for you to sort of set the record straight. I think there's unfortunately a misconception today that because Balabatim have the opportunity to very quickly get involved in askanas and being active, that there's this misconception that there's some decision-making ability that comes from their role as an askan. And I know that that's erroneous, but I want to invite you to sort of share the ongoing legacy of Rav Moshe Sher, that the Mayetzis is still at the forefront of this decision-making, and it's fantastic that Balabatim do get involved, but I think we'd love to hear just the breakdown of the division of responsibilities within the Aguda.
And it's not for all Balabatim, because many Balabatim cannot understand that they will not be the decision makers.
Right? Is that like unpopular today?
Right. And so there are some Balabatim who we invite them to join our boards and so on, and we explain to them that the ultimate decision-making authority rests in the hands of the Moetzes Gedolei Torah, right? And sometimes they'll make decisions that you may not be so comfortable with, but that's the way this is structured. And for some of them, it's just not a good fit, because they don't know how to deal with that. But on the others, I look at the people who are the Balabatim in an organization like the Aguda, and I think that this view is starting to take hold in many other organizations as well, that there needs to be a Das Torah, there needs to be a rabbinic authority to whom issues are brought, certainly issues that have some clear halachic or hashkafic ramifications, but even other issues as well. And I think it's a tremendous limud zchus on Klal Yisrael that there are wealthy people who are used to running businesses and making decisions and being listened to and obeyed without a snap of a finger, who come into organizations like the Aguda and say, okay, I'm here to help. I'll offer my opinion. I hope my opinion will be taken seriously, but ultimately I submit to the authority of Gedolei Yisrael. That's quite a limud zchus on Klal Yisrael. And as I say, I think I'm seeing more and more of that in organizations and movements that traditionally had not really been controlled, so to say, by Das Torah. But where there's more and more of that today, I see that in a variety of organizations. So I like to think that the generation of younger people who are today entering organizational life because they're valued for their ability to make monetary contributions. A lot of them are very smart guys, hip, understand the world, maybe understand it even better than the Gedolei Yisrael who are sitting around the table, but nonetheless submit to the authority of the Gedolei Yisrael. Wonderful. I think it's a great thing.
Wow. I've had the opportunity to hear you say a hesped, a eulogy for all the listeners, that of Avram Shomerger, who recently passed away, Zechrona Livracha, and you've had in your time with the Aguda, you've had the opportunity to interact and work with legendary philanthropists, including him and his mechutin, Moshe Reichman, Paul Reichman, and how would you like today's generation of folks that experience financial success, how do you want them to view their role within the ecosystem of Klal Yisrael?
So my Rebbe Rav Pam, getting back to him, used to speak often at the Aguda convention about building Torah. To him, that was the answer to everything. More yeshivas, better qualified rebbeim, that building Torah, that's what he said. And he would always say that all that's missing, we have the ability to reach so many children, so many families. All that's missing is money. He says, and now is the time, he says, for us to realize that if Hashem has blessed us with money, it's because Hashem wants us to be the Gaboyim, the Gaboy Tzedakah for Klal Yisrael. He has chosen the Gaboy Tzedakah very carefully, right? But ultimately, it's not meant for them to hoard over and use it for frivolous purposes. Klal Yisrael needs their money. So again, this message is a message which I believe has been heard by many of our younger people today. People tell me sometimes that the young generation is apathetic. They don't really care. Nothing is important to them other than just their own personal things. From my vantage point, that ain't true.
I don't think so either.
It's not so. I think the younger generation does care. I think that the younger Gevirim today, who are very generously supporting some extraordinarily important causes, again, it's a tremendous limit for Klal Yisrael. These are people who view and who really understand and really feel that Hashem has blessed them, not necessarily so that they can spend their money on frivolous matters or hoard their money and not spend it for anything, but to help Klal Yisrael and in different ways. So, many of them will look for a unique role that they might play within the broad structure of Klal Yisrael and pick out the organization that they want to join or the one that they want to start sometimes. But they are willing and able and Baruch Hashem carry out their role as the Gaboy Tzedakah for the community.
You had mentioned briefly about building, and what we need is money, and there sure is, thank God, a lot of that today, and it should continue.
Amen.
Amen.
Rachmanu Yifarnu Seinu B'Chavod, right?
Yeah, say it out loud, right? Something that is happening now, and has come up recently, is our yeshiva education being threatened. You yourself, the Aguda, is at the forefront at trying to protect the yeshivas and our I guess religious rights. Can you sort of, I guess, speak to that issue at hand and the vantage point that you have at the Aguda with that battle?
Okay, great. I mean, it's a multifaceted issue and a lot of different aspects to this challenge that we're now facing. But I guess, in its starkest terms, the issue is the autonomy of our yeshivas and their ability to continue to serve in the function that they have, and to carry out a mission that they have carried out since time immemorial. Even focusing here just on what's been happening in the United States.
We may take a step back and just outline for anyone that may not be familiar. We're talking specifically about legislation in New York State that impacts the autonomy of our schools, that allows anyone to file a grievance. Is that right?
That's part of it. I mean, the fuller picture is that under the state statute, all private schools are supposed to provide an education that is substantially equivalent to that which is offered in the neighboring public schools. Mm-hmm. Now, if this is read literally and understood literally, you got me talking lawyerese now. If this is understood literally, then...
Well, Momo was also an attorney, so I am very
guilty
much
as charged.
Very much underqualified over here.
Okay, there you go. but taken literally, this concept of substantially equivalent, right? So what you ought to do is look at what the public school next door offers and make sure that all the courses that are taught in the public school from 9 to 3 or whatever it is every day should be taught in the neighboring non-public school. And so it has to be substantially equivalent. Of course, if that were the way it were interpreted and implemented and enforced, it would result in the wholesale changing of the Seder Hayom, right? The schedule of limud, of learning Torah in our schools. We have a dual course of instruction, Limudei Kodesh, Limudei Chol. We spend many hours on Limudei Kodesh. Even the so-called more modern Orthodox schools spend many hours on Limudei Kodesh, right? And you can't compare the number of the amount of time spent on Limudei Chol in the yeshivas, in any yeshiva, to that which is done in the public school. So how do you deal with that? So for over 100 years, the state dealt with it by not paying too much attention, because the problems that they faced in education were primarily out there among the public school population. And they always understood, specifically with respect to yeshivas, that the yeshivas offer, in fact, a very rigorous academic program, because if you take into account the nature of the study of Talmud in particular, right, Mishnah, Talmud, Chumash, whatever it may be, you take into account the nature of the study of these courses. They are intellectually challenging. We all know that. We know that they sharpen critical thinking skills. They enable you to read carefully, and they're able to articulate your ideas with precision, right? All of these things are things that are essential and become part of who you are as a human being, as an educated human being, by having spent your time in yeshiva. And that's what education is really supposed to be. It's not about knowing facts, whatever. You know, I went to Tarvadas, as I mentioned, and in 11th grade, I remember we studied trigonometry. Not once in my life have I ever used any of the principles I studied in trigonometry in any practical or even impractical way.
Right.
Same.
Okay.
Things haven't changed now. Do you remember Sokotoa? Did you do Sokotoa? Is that
a place? Like, what is that? Sokotoa
stands for something. SOH, whatever it is.
It's an acronym, yeah.
It's an acronym. The people who studied that particular subject in those days.
I'm familiar with PEMDAS.
Okay, well, whatever it is, I don't feel like I have lived a deprived life.
For sure not.
Because I haven't, I never really studied the Ming Dynasty in China. I just don't feel that.
I know my wife every Friday night stands there by the Shabbos candles. She covers her eyes and she davens that she should have children who will be B'nai Torah and will be Meirim Es Ha'olam. Don't get me to sing it. You don't want me to do that. Kulo, right? B'Torah, B'Masim Torah, right? Well, which tune would you sing it in? Right? We're all thinking Baruch Levine. No, like that's
Baruch Levine.
Okay, we're all going with that.
Okay. That's what our ambitions for our children. That's what they are, right? And so therefore we need a yeshiva. We need a place where they can spend 5 hours a day in Limud Torah at a young age, or 4 hours or 6 hours or whatever the case may be, depending on the Messiah of that particular yeshiva, of that particular Hasidus, of that particular yeshiva background, whatever it is. And here comes the state, and the state says, we're going to make you substantially equivalent. Substantially equivalent means we're asking you basically to change the nature of your Seder HaLimud every day. And then there's more than that. They send in local education bureaucrats to come in and look at the schools and see whether what they're teaching satisfies the legal obligations of what you have to teach. So, let's look across the pond for a moment. In England, a couple of years ago, there's a government agency over there which has very broad power to come and inspect private schools. It's an ongoing, they come in at least on an annual basis to each of the private schools. And a couple of years ago, they visited the Vizhnitza Girls' School, the Vizhnitza Girls' School primary school, and primary schools in England are, younger classes. And they said the academic program is satisfactory, and all of the girls are very well behaved and enthusiastic about their school. But we find the school to be not adequate, I think is the phrase that they use, on balance, because they don't teach about LGBT things, and they don't speak about transgender, and the tolerance and diversity that we in England are trying to make sure that all of our children grow up with is not being developed in this school, because they don't teach that, and therefore the school is considered not in compliance, not adequate.
Wow.
Are we very far from that over here in certain what we call woke communities and societies? Again, the United States is a very splintered country today, but those of us who live in New York,
Right.
As the three of us do, right? So we're in a very blue state with very blue social attitudes, right?
Yeah.
And is it a terrible stretch to imagine that one day soon some bureaucrat's going to come knocking on our door and say, "Where's your LGBT curriculum?"
So what is that? That's a scary thought, especially because that's just gonna be where it starts, and as the world is becoming more woke and there are more letters added to that situation over there, it's never ending. And we lose control of what our kids are learning in the yeshivas. So the Aguda is sort of at the forefront.
So I read an article from one of the English papers about this thing, and they said that they did some sort of a survey, and according to the survey, 43% of yeshiva schools were similarly non-compliant with not providing an LGBT, training or whatever. And I'm thinking to myself, 43% are non-compliant.
Which
What happened to the other 57%? Is that do you mean really that we'll teach things that are against our hashkafa, halacha, that try to impose upon our children, our dear precious holy children, viewpoints and perspectives that are dramatically opposed to concepts that we understand from the Torah? It's a very frightening thing. And that's why I think that this particular issue is an issue which affects the Hasidic schools, which have minimal limudei chol, minimal secular studies. But it even affects what I'll call the more modern Orthodox schools, because once you yield your autonomy, to the extent it's saying that, yes, government bureaucrats can come in and inspect and see what we teach and how we teach and whom we employ to be teachers, and to evaluate that and determine whether a school is compliant or non-compliant with the law, is substantially equivalent to the public schools.
And you're just handing over the keys.
You're handing the keys. And we may not see any negativity for a year or 5 years or 15 years, but once these regulations are in place, then they are an invitation to this kind of confrontation, which will inevitably happen.
We are joined again by Rabbi Dovid M. Cohen.
Welcome back.
Welcome back. We're discussing together
Well,
again.
I just have to say that you guys, I love this pairing, and I'm a big
you.
fan. Momo and I are neighbors, right? Nafi and I are broader neighbors.
He's good people.
And I've been zocha to be a meaningful person on this podcast,
Yes.
so that was a great treat. And really kol kavod to what you guys are doing for Klal Yisrael. Just all the different mediums and venues are incredibly impactful. And it's just for me to be able to have a few minutes to sit here with you guys and to share in the great work that you're doing.
Thank
We
you.
appreciate it. Speaking of blessings, but you just gave us a really nice blessing, I feel.
Amen.
I'm a Kohen, so that's
You are. So I'm going to take
Birkas
that.
Kohen.
I want to take that straight
Wow.
to Chase Bank right down there and try to deposit that. We davening, davening pre-pandemic, davening post-pandemic. There are so many weeks and months that we were davening on the porch of our home, and now some people found themselves back in the shul. Some people maybe haven't found themselves back in the shul.
It's a real struggle.
It really is.
I was talking about it with someone recently, and it's a period of time in history, and it's still coming together where we're processing it as a historical event, as a historical tkufa. But within the Frum community, you are at the forefront, I understand, of helping us describe what happened and what is happening today, right? Because in this pandemic that we all experienced, everyone at the time was just figuring it out. Like Nachi mentioned, we're davening on our porch. Yes, minyan, not minyan. You know, there's shitas and there's paiskim, and then there's just hadracha. Then there's just people, frankly, just bugging out and having a hard time with it.
Right.
And then things started to, relax. People started emerging, and shul started having minyanim again. And there was never like this like das Torah that like came out and said, oh, this is now what has to happen. It was all so organic. It was all very slow and gradual. And it's very hard to pinpoint the inflection point where, okay, now it's over and it's back. Well, hopefully not back to normal. Hopefully not back to before. But what have we taken from what we learned from COVID? And how do we now re-engage in our participation in a shul, in a chevra, in a community, in a kehila, with a rav? What role is it playing for us today?
It's a very, very powerful question. I can't claim to be the das Torah on the subject by any stretch, but I can share my personal experiences and my own reflections, which is a lot of what I do in the book, which is kind of hopefully guiding people in different realms of relationships through my own experiences and through my own private lens. So I can share with you that pre-pandemic, I was in the Poconos for a week with my family, and whatever the construct was, I didn't have a Shabbos minyan, and I was like in terrible pain over that. And Hashem sent me like, I wanted to have a minyan so badly. The Rosh was mezamin for me a minyan in the Poconos that Shabbos with the tremendous siyata d'shmaya. It's in the book, the story. It's not for now, but that construct of then going from there to kind of having been away from minyanim for so long. And then I'm talking as a Rav, it was difficult for me to go back to shul. And there were times when I was like, should I push for that minyan? Should I not? And well, why should I push? I mean, I've been davening at home beautifully all these months. Now I have to push myself. And honestly, it took me like a serious amount of time for me to make that extra effort, like late at night to run out to Marav, to chop the minyan. It was something that I struggled with. And on some level, as I talk about a lot in the book, there are many milas to personal tefillah. And I'm talking now about people that are taking tefillah very seriously. I'm not talking about just people that maybe, aren't serious about tefillah. I mean, people are serious about tefillah. Right. There's no question that davening b'yachidus has benefits, has a toelas. You move at your own pace. You can reflect more. You're not affected by like kind of a pressure to kind of keep a certain pace or what other people are doing. At the same time, I argue in the book that there might be a mesiras nefesh, a personal mesiras nefesh of self-sacrifice of going to shul. I don't come at it from from a halachic perspective of koach hatzibur. Come at it from naniach. It's true. We've seen from this experience that it's easier on many levels to do your own thing. And afal pichein, there's still a madrega to being with other people because we all help each other. In the sense that if I'm davening for Yeshua, I'm struggling with something, and I don't have the zchuyos to actualize that on my own, but somebody else in that tzibur may. And I can tap into that other person to elevate my own tefillas. Right. And this has hashachot, this has permutations and has a rollover effect in many realms where we need other people. And that's what the whole book is about. Together again, reimagining the relationships that anchor our lives. And I'll just add this point. I have the zchus to daven in Kilos Levavos, Momo in North Windmere at times, and also with Kodesh and BKNW and our Torah. I really am zocha now that I'm a rabbi at large. I don't have my own kehila. I'm able to really benefit from all that North Windmere has to offer. And I really see that the movement towards some of what we've extracted from the COVID experience when we were coming back together but had to kind of move things a little quicker or cut certain things out, there is a lot of lessons that can be learned, that can be gleaned across Klal Yisrael in terms of ensuring that davening moves at a good pace for people that maybe have a harder time, don't have the zitzfleisch to sit and to really be there the whole time. So to move it at a good pace, at a crisp pace, that singing people like to sing, to tap into something on a communal level. Chris Torah doesn't have to schlep. A rabbi has to be sensitive. I was a Rav for many years, 18 years in different pulpits. Say a beautiful piece of Torah, but prepare it. Say it succinctly. Say it in a way that's impactful, but doesn't do a whole 5-minute introduction before you even get to the essence. So I think there are practical lessons in terms of how we can make shul more appealing and more appetizing for people. There's a reason why people are still in their backyards or aren't coming back. It is a little bit of a reflection of like been there, done that. in certain places, I think the Five Towns has been metamorphosized in many ways, in positive ways. And we can mention Mavakshi Hashem and other places where there's a different tom going on. It's really tapping into what people are yearning for. And I don't need to mention all the amazing Rabbanim that are doing so many amazing things. But I think, particularly in that old staid kind of old, cathedral type synagogue model, I think people have to really reimagine and begin to realize that they're positive lessons. Instead of reflecting so much on why aren't people coming back and our shuls are suffering, like, let's reflect and let's really think about how we can change what we're offering and do things a little bit differently, see what's working, and adapt those things and create transformation in the kehila experience, which will uplift people, which then helps people have better relationships, which helps it trickled down to all different areas of life and relationships. So that's something I talk a lot about. Again, we just touched on it briefly, but I think there's a lot of yisodos to continue this work of reimagining it, because we're not there yet. It's a continuous process, but there's what to be learned.
Together Again can be purchased on rabbidovidmcohn.com. Thank you so much.
Or in your local Judaica store.
Or in your local Judaica store if you're walking on the street.
I love walking around here on Central Avenue, peeking into different stores, seeing where the book is and how many copies are still there. I sometimes even ask, "How's this book doing?"
Thank you so much.
It's a baby. It's like you're right. It's like you deliver a baby. It takes a long time to write a book. You want people to, there's not a lot of money in writing books, but you want people to take the time. It's a quick read. It's an easy read, and people should hopefully enjoy it. It's something people can get through in a few hours. And hopefully there's a lot of different nuggets for people, all different places of life. So that's the hope, is the sincere hope, is that it should help people grow and to grow together with others, to be together again.
Enjoy, people.
So what's something that you do in your position to, I guess, combat that and make sure that our yeshivas or Yaakovs don't end up in that situation?
So we're working frankly with the State Education Department and with the Board of Regents, and we're trying to get them to understand our concerns and to amend, to withdraw the regulations. Very interestingly, this is the second time in 3 years that the New York State Education Department is trying to introduce and promulgate new regulations in this area. 3 years ago, when they put out the proposal at that time, it generated 140,000 comments from the public, the overwhelming majority of them being against these proposed regulations, in opposition, most of them coming from the yeshiva community.
Wow. It's worth noting that you don't have to live in New York for your comment to be considered.
Absolutely.
As you're listening to this.
Absolutely. If you live in Lakewood and you're in New Jersey, and New Jersey is not at the moment considering the law, once New York implements a law of this nature, then that becomes a model that can easily be replicated in other states as well. So this is
or if you're in California.
Or California.
Or if you're in Hawaii.
You can go through all 50 states if you'd like.
Yeah. If you're in Hawaii, God bless you.
And
please.
Tonight for a while.
Right.
I think Momo should say all 50 states. It's really scary. But thank God there is an organization that's in place to.
We may at some point. I before you thank God and thank the Aguda, we may at some point down the road. Have to sharpen up our litigation skills again and go back to challenging this in court.
Well,
I'm not sure what the outcome will be. Not at all clear. It's a difficult subject, a difficult parsha. There are other issues as well with respect to the proposed new regulations. I don't want to go into all of the detail, but I will say that we are in the midst of yet another explosion of comment from the community into the State Education Department. I heard this morning that over 80,000 comments have already been submitted.
Where can someone make a comment?
Well, there's a portal which has been developed by the Aguda and Touro University. We work together. Another organization called Pearls. We're all working together, which people can send us their letters, their comments, and they're forwarded over to the State Education Department.
And the Aguda has made it very, very easy to facilitate this letter writing.
Right.
You can just click on the link. I'm sure we'll post it here.
There are form letters that have been developed, but frankly, the best letter of all, the best comment of all, is one that is somebody with his or her own language will say, I'm a product of yeshiva education, and here's what I got out of yeshiva education, and please don't tamper with it, and to use you and to say that in your own words and with your own experiences, that would be very, very valuable. So we're up to 80-something thousand. The comment period ends the end of this month, the end of May. So we've got another 2.5 weeks from today or so to get comments in, and I'm hopeful that we'll come close to or even exceed the 140,000 that we had 3 years ago.
All right, pivoting a bit from this topic, and it is really an important one. You've had the advantage, or I guess the front row seat at every big Jewish thing over the last few decades. You've been in, close proximity with presidents, senators, governors.
Siyam Hashas's.
Oh, we want to talk about that as a whole topic.
Moetzes's. What's,
right?
I guess, being around such, what's the right word? Not valuable people. Everyone's valuable, but just high-profile people.
High-profile people.
What's, I guess, a common denominator of these people who you come into contact with, and what's that like from you, like yourself, who grew up in the Torah world? What's their I guess, perception of you?
Well, the first thing I guess you learn quickly enough is that even the highfalutins are human beings, and human beings, and even politically oriented human beings have feelings. And I find that the most effective way of reaching people that you have to deal with, you have to direct your advocacy efforts toward, is by recognizing that they're human beings with feelings, and according them the dignity of that stature. At least that's my style, and Baruch Hashem, more often than not, it's something which has yielded success. I hope that when we deal with people who are not intimately familiar with Torah Jews, there are a lot of negative perceptions about our community, unfortunately. But really, they are. We do carry the burden when we walk in there to represent a community of trying to create Kiddush Hashem rather than its opposite, right? And that's a very, that's something very, very firm in my mind. Another early lesson that I learned from Rabbi Sher, I settled into my office at 5 Beekman Street, where the Aguda used to have its offices. And I put up a couple of pictures. Rabbi Sher walks into my office, and he looks around and looks up at the wall, and he goes over to one of the pictures and he adjusts it a little bit. And he turns around to me and says, Chaim Dovid, if there's one thing I can't stand, it's a crooked picture. We have to all remember that. None of us should be able to stand a crooked picture.
Wow.
And that's...
Beautiful.
That was his way of teaching me that.
Let's discuss the Siyam Shas.
Yes.
90,000 people under one roof, or no roof.
Or no roof. Right. That was
Created,
quite a risk.
Yeah, led by the Aguda. I guess what's the planning process for making an event? There's some mothers out there that they lose sleep over making a bar mitzvah for 200 boys. So what's it like making a party for 90,000 people?
It's a multi-year process, and I mean, and I don't just mean the learning of it,
right?
Learning of the daf, but there's just so much to say about it. I guess the exciting thing about a Siyam Hashas is that this is what ultimately unites Klal Yisrael, right? We spoke before about different people from different backgrounds, people from wearing different head coverings and pronouncing words differently, and so on and so forth. But the Ki Ish Echad B'Leiv Echad was created as a result of Har Sinai and the Torah, right? And so 90,000 people coming together, and just to see the diversity of people who have come to celebrate Torah.
Yeah.
Not all the 90,000 are learners of Daf Yomi, right? And the Daf Yomi has given us an opportunity every 7.5 years, not only to finish Shas, but it also gives us an opportunity every 7.5 years to come together and celebrate our uniqueness as the Am Hashem, because we are the Am HaTorah, and
bringing us back to Har Sinai.
Absolutely.
Could we do it in the summer though?
Yes.
Yeah.
That you write us a letter.
Yes. Okay.
Right, and we'll work it out.
You get 140,000 comments.
Yeah. No. Really, I'm not.
The previous one was August 1st.
The one was August 1st, and since it's a 7.5 year cycle, I'm pretty confident that your letter will be treated very seriously.
So we're like going for June.
Right. 7.5 years. 7.5 years from January 1, 2020. The remarkable thing this year was that we had no idea when we were all crowded together and huddled in the cold arena over there that we were a month away from COVID.
Wow, that's true.
Right? We were a month away from COVID, 90,000 people sitting side by side.
Wow.
Right? Super spreader, can you imagine what
it's fascinating that COVID did exist.
In the world, yeah.
Right? In Asia, it had already hit and spread. And one might say that Siyam HaShas in the U.S. kept it at
bay for a little bit longer.
We couldn't have had it yet.
I think the Siyam HaShas this time, because COVID hit so strongly and shockingly immediately after that, Siyam HaShas had added importance even beyond what it usually has this time, because it gave us a sense of internal chizuk that kept us going. So we couldn't get together in shul.
Right.
We couldn't get together to hear the shiurim, so we came up with new ways of learning on the telephone, on the Zoom, whatever it may be. We found ways to connect, but we knew we had to connect. We knew we had to be part of this Klal Yisrael that comes together through the Torah.
Speaking of COVID, the Aguda was very active during COVID because there is for many reasons, different colors of what zone you lived in, but there was a mayor that was...
You're thinking of a governor.
I was thinking about a mayor also.
Because the lawsuit that we can talk about was Agudath Israel of America versus Cuomo.
Oh, the other one we can't talk about.
The other one was not a lawsuit.
Right.
But go ahead. I'm sorry. I interrupted you. I penalized me for 5 points or whatever.
I'm just curious, Bill de Blasio was somebody that went up in the ranks in politics, and he was somebody that the Aguda got behind and they endorsed him.
No, we never endorse. We're not allowed to endorse.
Not endorse.
If you would be a lawyer like the two of us, you would know that.
Yes. I'm really in
objection.
A 501c3 organization is not permitted to endorse a candidate.
So you didn't endorse him, but you then what?
You developed a good working relationship with him.
A good rapport, and some would say that he.
There's a story about the guy who organized a rally for Candidate A on 13th Avenue one Sunday afternoon. And 3 weeks later, he organized a rally for Candidate B, running against Candidate A on 13th Avenue on Sunday afternoon. So somebody asked, how can you do this? He says, well, whoever wins, I want him to know we were behind him 100%. So
it's true.
That's the way we endorse candidates. We're behind everybody 100%.
Some would say that Bill de Blasio turned his back on the Jewish people during this. Maybe on Twitter, maybe in action, things he said and done.
Some of the things he said some stupid things, no question about it.
And for the people who saw this happen and were affected by it, I'm sure they were enraged, and they were calling the Aguda and saying, what's going to happen? What can be done?
Right. So de Blasio has known our community for a long time, and we've known him for a long time. Before he became mayor, he was the
city councilman.
He was a city councilman. That's where he started off, and he represented a good portion of Borough Park. The word is an overused word, and it doesn't really mean very much, but we considered him a friend. A friend means somebody who was accessible to us. When we would call him, he would get back to us, which is the most important thing, by the way, in any political relationship. Right? It's not so much where they stand on any given issue, which is important also, but also, are they accessible? And when you need their help, will they be responsive? Right? Which we found de Blasio to be in many situations. I don't think he is or was an anti-Semite. I think that he said some silly things. By the way, I say some silly things too. I know the two of you don't, but you know,
We have to be careful.
right? And offensive things, not just silly, offensive. And he was taken to task, and he was rightly taken to task. There were things that happened in his administration which we didn't like, and we communicated to him very openly about it, candidly, and there were times where we had some issues. But by and large, I have to say that Mayor de Blasio was accessible, and from my perspective at least, was somebody that I was very comfortable in working with. We didn't sue Mayor de Blasio over any of the COVID restrictions. That was a bizarro relationship between the mayor and the governor, which each one seemed like to want to outdo the other, and it was a very strange.
There's gonna be a movie about that sometime.
No doubt there will be. No doubt there will be.
But there was a lawsuit against Governor Cuomo.
There was a lawsuit against Governor Cuomo when he decided that houses of worship should be closed down in situations where essential gatherings were permitted.
Right.
But you know, davening together is not considered essential. Tattoo parlors were considered essential. It was very strange to see how he divided those things. And here we had a real Shiloh. You know, on the one hand, we had worked with Governor Cuomo for many years. We had, I think, accomplished a number of very positive things through our relationship with Cuomo. But at the same time, we felt that he was, number one, taking actions which prevented us from davening when we shouldn't have been prevented from davening b'tzibur. And number two was saying things which were just like deeply, deeply offensive, such as, about the Hasidic Jews being a powerful voting bloc.
Right.
Saying things like that publicly, again, that's the language of the hater. And we turned to our Rabbanim, because this is, again, a shayla for Das Torah. Should we swallow hard and accept what the governor was doing, right, and try and work with him behind the scenes, as we had, to no avail, or should we bring him to court? And at that time, there was another lawsuit that was being prepared, a parallel lawsuit that was being prepared by the Brooklyn Diocese. And the Rabbanim felt, look, we shouldn't be in a position where the Brooklyn Diocese is standing up for their right to gather together to pray, and the Jewish community does not stand up for that right. Mm-hmm. That itself is problematic. And certainly in a situation where we think that there is at least a good possibility that we can prevail, go for it. And they authorized us to bring a lawsuit. That's very rare, very rare.
Yeah, I think it was
not the very first time it happened, but it is a rare thing. We try not to be antagonistic. We try not to be confrontational, adversarial, all of those things that lawyers get rich on. Mm-hmm. We try not to be. We try to work, in an advocacy way behind the scenes, and maintain only positive, warm relationships. But here, the Chaverim of the Moetzes Gedolei Torah and others who were brought into the conversation felt that we should sue, and we did. And we lost in the lower court, and we lost in the appellate court, even though the appellate court, there was a 2-1 vote, so there was one judge who came down on our side. And then it went all the way to the United States Supreme Court, and by a vote of 5-4, we prevailed, which was an amazing victory. I'll never forget it was after my pajamas were on, and I was in the middle of Kriya Shema Lamita, and I get a phone call from Avi Schick, who was the lawyer who was handling the case for us. But it was about five minutes to midnight, Erev Thanksgiving. And I said, Avi, what's going on? He says, the court just handed down its ruling. We won.
Wow.
Wow.
What's that like?
Wow. I wasn't too conducive to the next hour or two of my sleep.
It's a good thing you didn't say Hamapil already.
Right. And it was a great victory. Interestingly, at the convention, we have our convention on starting Thanksgiving Day. So, but this year that year it was all a pre-taped convention.
It was virtual, yes.
The virtual convention was all pre-taped. So we couldn't even celebrate on the convention itself the victory that we had achieved.
So the pre-tape went out and it was like very unenthusiastic about the news that just came out.
That's right.
We are back here with
Welcome back.
Shmuel Sackett. Man, like, do you sleep in this office? You're here already like 4 times, you know? But we're very excited to discuss the Dream Raffle with you.
It is something very, very exciting. And you know, we're towards the end of the raffle right now, guys. This is the time. Because some people say, you know, why should I buy a ticket in September and October? The raffle is till the end of December 31st. But this is it. This
Crunch
is
time.
Crunch
Yes.
time.
Chaparan.
Or as we say in Israel, this is actually an expression in Hebrew. Money time. Ze money time. I promise you that's a Hebrew expression.
That's
Ze
fantastic.
money time. The first time a guy said that to me, I
Sounds
said,
so much like English.
you kidding me? Any case, Ze money time.
It is.
So this is the time, thedreamraffle.com. And we'll double your tickets. Whatever you buy, we'll double it. Code MPP, Meaningful People Podcast, save an additional $10. And let me tell you, one of the projects that we support from these funds, there's a place called Mechinat Liel. It helps teens at risk, but extreme risk. I'm talking about lo aleinu, kids on drugs, runaways, criminals, and they turn them into amazing people. It's in the Jordan Valley, way out there. I'll even take you if you want to come and visit. It is an incredible place, Mechinat Liel. It's named after a soldier, Liel, I don't remember his last name, who was killed in battle in the Lebanon War. And his best friend started this center and is supported from funds from the Dream Raffle. So thedreamraffle.com, supporting that and other causes as well. Fantastic.
And if
this is the time.
And if that's not enough, you can win $1 million apartment in the heart.
It's such a nice
of
aspect
Yerushalayim.
where, you can win an incredible.
You know, I was in the
prize.
apartment recently, and I had to have a mincha, and it was running late. Didn't have a time to chap a minyan, so you try to figure out like which way is Harabayit.
Not when you're in the apartment.
I looked outside the window. Whoop! There it is.
There it is.
This is not in the direction. There it is.
We see Gourmet Glot.
Wow.
You see Harabayas. And
You don't need to take out your phone for a compass.
for a
No.
compass.
Open the
No,
window.
you go right there.
everyone, that's
So
the
that's
Dream
a
Raffle.
great thing, right? The Dream Raffle. Use the code MPP.
MPP.
Double your tickets and
.com.
.com.
Don't forget that dot.
No,
Don't
don't lose the
forget.
.com.
Shmuel,
Anyway,
thanks.
yeshikoch to you guys.
Of course.
Since this is the final commercial of the season, just wanted to give you a big yeshikoch and everything you do
Thank
on
you.
spreading the positive light in Judaism,
Appreciate it.
Jewish pride, and fantastic. The energy of the
yeah.
show is incredible. I
Thank
give you a
you.
bracha. Keep going.
Oh, man,
man.
and I can't wait to see you again when you're handing me the keys to the apartment when I win.
You are ineligible because advertisers are ineligible.
Whoa.
But someone watching or listening to the show could win, and you'll have
Okay.
nachis. Nachi will have nachis.
My wife is going to have
Maybe
to
you'll
buy.
get an invitation.
Yeah.
There it is. There it
All
is.
right.
TheDreamRaffle.com, guys. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Wow, you're reminding me when you talk about changing the script last minute. I think I owe a personal debt of gratitude to you. When I was turning bar mitzvah in Los Angeles, in the morning, my boy bayam the night before was an Aguda dinner, and my father was the chairman, he should be gezind, of that dinner. And
Your father, Dr. Irving Bauman?
Mr. Irving
Mr.
Bauman.
Irving Bauman. Yeah.
yes, Dr. Irving Leibovitz is
Ah, there
in
you go.
California. He's a close friend and very active in the Aguda.
Oh, yes.
And that day was the unfortunate passing of Rav Moshe Sher Zechrona Livracha, and Vice President Al Gore was attending the dinner. I'm sure it was a chaotic day. I mean, what was that like from your vantage point?
Early afternoon, we heard the Besur Lotova about Rabbi Sher. He had been sick for a while, and we heard the Besur Lotova early afternoon. The dinner was slated to start, I think, if I remember correctly, the program at 6:30 or something like that, and the reception at 5 or 5:30. Of course, the vice president was coming in. We were able to get him to come in early enough so that there would be people who would be able to shake his hand before the dinner. So he was there already by 5 or 5:30, whatever. But we didn't know what to do. At first, we said, should we cancel? We can't cancel the dinner. It's a few hours before the dinner. People are coming in. They're flying in for this.
And the vice president is coming.
And the vice president is coming. Yeah. You know, on the other hand, Rabbi Moshe Sher was the Aguda. I mean, he was the incredible leader of Klal Yisrael. That so we had to show him derech eretz. So we came to a decision. I think it was the right decision, although it was one of the hardest decisions we ever had to make, and there's some who still are upset with us for it, that we would go forward with the dinner, but that the honorees, the section with of the dinner where videos are shown of each of the honorees and so on and so forth, that would be, we would pull the plug on that, and keep the focus of the dinner more of a tribute to the memory of Rabbi Sher. So that was a tough decision because we had honorees and their guests who were coming special for this. And some of them said you did the right thing, and others said they haven't forgiven us yet. But I sat down with your father after we heard the news, and he had prepared his opening remarks as chairman. And of course, those had to go out the window. And in the space of about an hour, we redid his speech entirely.
Wow.
And got it typed up. And so it was...
With the Secret Service dogs sniffing at his feet. He tells the story.
That part I didn't know, but... And we introduced then Al Gore, and he used his speech to deliver a eulogy for Rabbi Sher. And the Levaya was the following day.
Wow.
So it turns out that the first maspid for Rabbi Sher was the Vice President of the United States the night before.
Wow.
Right? He had been nifter on Sunday afternoon. The Levaya was on Monday morning. And in the air at that time were two Gedolei Yisrael from Eretz Yisrael, Rav Aaron Leib Steinman, Zecher Tzadik Levracha, and the Ger Rebbe, Shlita, should be gesund. And they came together to America for whatever reason they had come, and they arrived on Monday morning, and came straight to, or maybe they arrived Monday afternoon. I forget exactly when it was, and they came straight to the Beis Olam, to the cemetery where Rabbi Sher was being buried, and they were maspid him over there. So their first act on foreign territory, on American soil, was to offer a hesped and participate in the Levaya of Rav Moshe Sher. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu has his ways of, one of the most powerful people in the world in terms of political power, the Vice President of the United States, right? And he was the first, and then it was capped off by the two towering Gedolei Yisrael from Eretz Yisrael.
And in the midst of all the chaos,
you had your bar mitzvah.
You managed to get my father a police escort to the airport so he could make it back in time for my bar mitzvah.
Time for your bar mitzvah. You didn't have to change your pshetel, though, did you? No. Okay.
I want to end off this episode with one more question. We have a lot of young listeners. I'm not going to define what age range. Everyone from young is relative.
As far as I'm concerned, anybody under 65.
Yes, young is relative. What is something that maybe the Aguda is, misunderstood, that people misunderstand about the Aguda, and you could have this sort of platform to set the record straight and say, you know what, like, this is the truth. What is that?
I guess the Aguda has a reputation in many circles as a rich man's club.
That's juicy.
Okay. You like that reputation?
That's good, yeah.
It's erroneous.
Yeah. It's erroneous. It is erroneous. Again, I mentioned earlier, of course it is important for an organization, especially an organization which is as large as the Aguda, is involved as many areas as the Aguda. I mean, we have 5 lawyers on staff. Mm-hmm. Actually 4. One of them was just nifter. A short while ago, tragically, Mordechai Beiser. So right now there are 4 on staff. We hope to hire another one. But we have 5 lawyers on staff. We have people who are who man the regional offices around the country. There are 10 different states where we have regional offices.
Shout out Avi Schnall.
Avi Schnall is a superstar. If you haven't interviewed him yet, make sure to do that.
Nice.
Yeah, and a lot of different aspects. There's the youth activities, and there's senior citizen activities, and it's a large organization. It's a lot going on.
People think of it as,
and we need money. No question about it. We don't. I'm not earning Paul Weiss wages. None of our people are working at the Aguda because they teach Yifar Nesena B'Chaved in the traditional way, right? That's not the reason they're working for the Aguda. but you need money. So, of course, yes, we do have wealthy Balabatim. Ashreihem, the HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave them the opportunity to support an organization like Aguda, and they do it happily. And yes, we do have to, make events that show our appreciation for them, and so on and so forth. But again, the idea of what Agudat Yisrael is all about is we're trying to create a Koach HaRabim. Early on in my career at the Aguda, I was invited to Washington, D.C. to testify before the United States Senate Labor and Human Relations Committee. It related to a bill that was being introduced at that time, which would have effectively made it impossible for our yeshivos gedolos to receive students who get Pell Grants. Pell Grants is the federal form of assistance to needy college students. Our yeshivos gedolos are eligible for this type of funding, but had this bill been enacted, it would have basically made it impossible for them to participate in the program. So they invited me to testify, and I went on and I spoke about a couple of Supreme Court cases, and I spoke about a couple of other statutes and the civil rights laws and freedom of religion and whatever it was. Well, I gave a nice lawyerly presentation for 10 minutes, and the chairman of the senators looked very bored, frankly, as I was speaking. Finally, I finished and feeling very proud of myself. And Senator Metzenbaum, who was from Ohio, who was the chairman of this committee, says, "Rabbi, thank you for your remarks. Tell me, how many members does your organization have?" He wasn't interested in the Supreme Court cases I cited. He wasn't interested in the civil rights laws. He wasn't interested in freedom of religion. He just wants to know, why should I pay attention to you?
Right.
Why should I care what you have to say? So if you tell me that you have a lot of members, that may mean something. That's what's relevant. Every single person who attaches himself to the Aguda, right? You don't have to be rich at all. Attach yourself to the Aguda, become a member for $54 a year, right? What that does is it enables us to go to the government and tell Senator Metzenbaum and all of the others who ask that same question, basically, here's whom we represent. We represent people from all different backgrounds, people who are wealthy, but also people who are not, right? And you can be a part of it. You can accompany us up to Albany when we go there for a lobbying day. You can participate in a letter writing campaign to the state education department when they want to impose new regulations on yeshivas, which will be terribly intrusive, right? You can make a difference too. Attach yourself to Aguda. There are ways to make a difference in that all of us have. So, yeah, it is a rich man's club, so to say. Yes, we do certainly look for people of means who understand the chashivos, the importance of this organization, this movement, to come forward and help support us. But at the same time, this is a grassroots movement in the sense that our strength is in numbers. Our strength is in getting everybody involved in a meaningful way. So we have discovered also that people can make contributions of money, but they can also make all kinds of other contributions. People have skills. People have talents, right? And using those talents for the benefit of the klal, is something which is very, very special. So you can be wealthy in different kinds of ways. And in that respect, yep, we are a rich man's club because every single Jew is a rich man in one form or another.
Rabbi Chaim, Dovid, Zweibel, thank you so much for taking the time out of your schedule and joining us.
Well, thanks for having me. The time flew by pretty quickly.
Yes.
And I appreciate it very much.
Thank you.
Hope you enjoyed this episode. It's so interesting, Momo. A lot of times in life, we're always looking for the highest paying job and the job that gives us the most amount of dollars in our pocket. And it seems like Rabbi Chaim Dovid, he said, you know what, I want the job that's going to make the most impact.
Yeah, most rewarding.
Most rewarding.
Most rewarding, not necessarily financially. This is a man who has dedicated his life to public service.
Yeah.
And the entire Jewish community, nationwide, maybe worldwide.
Nationwide is on your side.
Is really benefiting from what Chaim Dovid Zweibel has dedicated himself to the Jewish people.
It's really incredible, and you can actually go watch the Aguda convention right now if you're listening.
Right now.
Oh, hello there, Slack. You can watch this right now if you're listening on Motzei Shabbos at agudaconvention.org. Not a paid ad, but you know what? Maybe you'll be there, Momo. I'll definitely be there. Maybe we'll
spread the light,
jump in front of a camera and say, ooh, ah, hey.
I don't anticipate saying either of those things.
No?
But yeah, no,
Very
it might be
common
fun.
terms. Anyways, we are so happy that you chose Meaningful People for this weekend. It's so funny because everyone's Spotify Wrapped is coming out. You know what that is? Like at the end of the year, you see like,
Yeah.
and Meaningful People is always at people's number one. And
Nice.
It's really amazing. But you know what's so funny? It's not at my number one,
Interesting.
or number 2, or 3, or 4. It's at number 5 for me.
Huh.
Interesting.
Good for you, Nafi.
Good for you, Momo. Good for you. What is it at your list?
So I'm not on Spotify, so I don't get that report.
Wow. Are you?
Yeah.
Do you even do?
I do Apple Music.
They don't have that, do they?
Not that I maybe they do.
Peasant. Peasant. Northwood Mayor. Ay.
Good times. Pretty
Good times.
sure it's over by now.
What
the
is-
episode. Yeah.
Oh, we ended? Nationwide is on your side. Hope you enjoyed this video from Meaningful Minute. We have so much more content for you. You may like this. You may like this. Take your pick. Let us know what you think.